Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for Sunday, March 9th. Brought to you by Vunabaka.com, a residential community in Fiji. First we'll look at the significant wave height chart for the North Pacific. We see a storm, small but fairly intense, 41-foot seas just east of the dateline, with most energy aimed east towards the Pacific Northwest, sideband energy down into California, and maybe even a little bit towards Hawaii. We also see some sea heights off the U.S. West Coast and passing Hawaii. This from a previous system that was on the dateline. Swell is currently hitting Northern California in the maybe 8 to 9 foot range faces in the San Francisco area and working its way south into Monday. Otherwise, a fairly benign pattern is in play. We'll start this week's tour taking a look at the upper level wind flow, jet stream level above 30,000 feet, looking at surface winds, or actually upper air winds, and height of the 250 millibar level. Nice flow off Japan, winds in the 170 knot range in one little pocket, flowing almost flat to the dateline. Then a little bit of a trough starting to develop here just east of the dateline. This is what is supporting low pressure development at the surface in the Western Gulf. East of there, the jet stream looks like it's about ready to start splitting here north of Hawaii, but there still is a pretty good healthy flow pushing up into Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. So really the first and only area for development that supports gale development is right here. Let's put this into motion, see how it rolls out. Notice that trough gets a bit more defined come Monday. That's about when that storm peaks out, and then it pretty much dissipates. But winds pick up to 190 knots pushing over the dateline, but sort of ridging north. Another little bit of a trough starts developing here on Thursday. It's the winds flowing down into the trough that are of most importance, and they're only 150 knot. You have the 170 plus knot winds here on the other side of the trough, and a pretty well-defined split jet east of there. Continuing on Thursday, that trough works its way into the Gulf into Friday, and then pretty much pinches off, and that's the end of it. Notice now a large split appears to be developing on the dateline by Saturday. That's almost a week out, and we'll put this out, and sure enough it fully splits, so that would support high pressure here. Any kind of low pressure would be off here, but wind speeds are weak, no real troughs going on, and we'll roll this out to 180 hours. So the short of it is, from an upper air perspective, big high pressure building off the U.S. East Coast long term. Any gale development that we're going to get is going to happen in the next couple of days here, be confined to this region, the Western Gulf, moving into the Gulf, at least from an upper air perspective. Next, let's take a look at surface level wind, surface level pressure. Notice the gale, actually a storm here east of the dateline, 55 knot winds, and let's take a look at Great Circle Pass, aimed pretty well into Northern California up the 296 degree path, but actually, and we don't have them on here, pass into Oregon, or even a little bit better because this system is expected to lift a bit north. And then relative to Hawaii, you see most of the energy is going across the Great Circle Pass rather than aimed down. We actually go back just a little bit. You can see as this thing first started forming, it had just a tiny fetch going into Hawaii down about the 225 degree path, but has quickly turned to the east as of now. Anyway, let's put this in motion, see what happens. The system has already peaked out wind-wise. It takes about 6 to 12 hours for seas to fully develop from that fetch, so that would be later tonight into Monday morning, and then it's on a downward slide as the system lifts north and pretty much heading towards Alaska. Another system though starts developing behind Monday night, but it's kind of fragmented, not particularly well organized, bits of fetch here and there, but not a consistent consolidated flow, and that thing sort of meanders. Finally come Wednesday or so. We also noticed in the upper air chart before there was a bit of a trough developing here, and that reflects at the surface. 45-knot winds develop on Wednesday morning, but doesn't hold together real well. The trough pinched out. This system starts falling apart. It loses its upper air energy source, and that's pretty much the end of it. Oh, tries to make a little comeback now per this. Here we go. This is into Friday. Lifting north, 45-knot winds for, what was that, 12 hours or so. That's probably not going to get a whole lot of traction on the ocean surface, and you don't get much swell from that. And then notice strong high pressure on the dateline, high pressure off the U.S. west coast. Looks like north wind swell for the islands, but probably poor winds there as well. We'll roll this out. That's just that. Actually, that northeast fetch kind of continues. Good for wind swell for the islands, but otherwise not a whole lot going on. Oops, and that's pretty much the end of it. And the system everything starts falling apart. Notice it's not massive high pressure. There's no signs that it's like going to gridlock everything down for an extended period of time, but definitely a break from the kind of continuous flurry of medium-sized swells that have been pushing into Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Now let's take a look at the effect of those winds, both the upper air winds, fueling the storm development, and surface level winds on the ocean surface. As mentioned before, here's this storm we were looking at, 41-foot seas as of the 18Z run on Sunday. That's 11 a.m. Sunday time, U.S. West Coast. And with peaks out, here we go into about 12, where are we looking at? 60, so that's early Monday morning, actually late Sunday night. Looks like about 45-foot seas, maybe 46, over a tiny little area aimed all pretty much into Oregon. We'll check this relative to Northern California. That's the 296. So yes, it does push into California, 296. Southern California, a bit too far north. We're into the 301, it looks like, degree path. So that's a bit too north to be optimal. And then it quickly peters out and is gone by Monday night. This another little interesting secondary fetch down here of 24-foot seas might help push a little bit more energy into the Pacific Northwest, but nothing dramatic. Rolling this out, here's the next system forms. It gets 36, 37-foot seas, but look at that, it's gone on Wednesday. Not a whole lot happening there. Here's that secondary fetch we saw, 34-foot seas for a little bit. So again, this is good for secondary swell into the usual targets out here. Actually, let's put this back. We'll see if we can just get a rough Northern California. That's again 296. So that's not so bad. But too north for Southern California to be optimal. And then things really fall apart. Here's this fetch associated with northeast winds for Hawaii. Nothing particularly interesting. Oops, and that's the end of it. That image we just showed, that was a week ago. So if those of you using the site, you can get up to almost 10 days of backlog off this tool. So there's a bunch of backlog of previous storms for 10 days, and then the 7.5-day forecast. So if you want to do a little bit of recent historical look back, you can. Next, let's take a look at the long-term, what's going to come 2, 3, 4, 6 months from now. Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Negative numbers represent, at a minimum, the active phase of the Madden-Julian Oscillation, which that active phase helps support storm development in the northern hemisphere during the winter. Positive numbers are the inactive phase, typically support high pressure buildup, and not so great for storm development. Currently, we've been going through a pretty good run of negative numbers for a month now, and certainly the active phase has been in play. Daily average is up a little, minus 4.84. 30-day running average down to 7.47. This is good. And the 90-day running average, 2.58. Again, sort of suggestive of a neutral pattern. So active phase in play right now, but otherwise neutral, no signs of El Nino at the moment. Next, let's take a look at wind anomalies in the West Pacific. This is West Pacific, Philippines here, Vietnam, China area there, Australia here. As of right now, very weak westerly anomalies over the maritime continent and weak westerly anomalies over the dateline. This appears to be the end of what has been an extremely long and prolific series of strong westerly winds that have been blowing for 2 months, if not longer. 2 westerly wind bursts, well defined, helping to form Kelvin waves, and we'll get into that in a minute. Two Kelvin waves is the expectation. Continuing on eastward, looking south of Hawaii, barely west anomalies, and then this sort of middling easterly anomaly pattern south of Mexico. That's been in play for a while now, but in general, a pretty benign setup. A week from now, the forecast is actually improving some. Westerly anomalies continuing over the maritime continent, turning pretty much neutral over the dateline. And then again, this weak kind of easterly pattern in a little pocket here, southeast of Hawaii, and then pretty much neutral on into Central America. So this suggests that perhaps, especially here, these westerly anomalies suggest that the active phase of the MJO has not given up the ghost completely, and that is good news. Here's another view of the same thing. This is, actually we'll get the scale here. So the West Pacific is here, let's say about 140. The East Pacific, California, about 120 west, and this is time going down. And the red is westerly anomalies, the blue are easterly anomalies. These westerly anomalies are the active phase of the MJO, and if not a westerly wind burst. As you can see, by about the 16th of February, we started in another westerly wind burst over the maritime continent. Again, strong. Here's the scale, right to the top of the scale by the 22nd of February, going the whole way through to March 2nd, roughly. Good westerly wind burst, every bit as strong as the one that occurred in January, but prolonged, longer with stronger winds. This is good, great for development of Kelvin waves. The forecast here suggests not a whole lot going on. Things basically return to a neutral pattern, if not slightly cooler, light easterly anomalies. So that's probably it for a little bit. This is good news though, and I'll show you why. But first, one more quick look at 2 different models, longer term, 2 weeks out, what's going on. Reds are the inactive phase of the MJO, high pressure, clear air. Blues are the active phase of the MJO, precipitation, clouds, limited reflectivity off the ocean surface. So the statistic model suggests that the inactive phase of the MJO is supposed to come in play, move to the dateline 15 days out, and pretty much take a lock things down as the active phase here starts pushing east and basically dissipates. The interesting thing is the dynamic model shows a very different picture. The inactive phase basically trying to make headway 5 days out, a week out, it stalls, and here we go, the active phase of the MJO again. This would be great if it happened. I think that's a highly optimistic outlook, but I'd like to think that that's more true than this, but we'll see. No, there's no way to know. 2 different models, 2 totally different projections. Probably some line down the middle is closer to reality, which would suggest just a return to a neutral pattern for 2 weeks out, 15 days out. Here's another look at the Southern Oscillation Index, the first series of numbers we looked at. Long-term trend. And as you can see, this is over time. You see increases in the SOI, decreases in the SOI. All this variability is associated with the inactive and active phase of the MJO. Starting in January, here is this big, long, continued drop. The biggest continuous drop anywhere in the past 2+ years. Good news, down to -7 or so. The question is, where are we going from here? Do we do a rebound up into positive? Do we hang here and maybe go negative more still unknown. But anyway, it puts things in historical perspective. We're back in a pretty good place for right now. It really depends what happens over the next 3 or 4 weeks. Next, we're going to look at sea surface temperature anomalies. These are different changes in sea surface temperature as compared to normal. We've been watching this persistent cool pool setting up here south of the United States and off Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands. It's actually backed off a little bit, which is good news. There's even some signs of a little bit of warmer water starting to take footing here off of Peru, Chile, Ecuador, but still nothing that is anywhere close to suggestive of El Nino. If anything, it looks more like a La Nina pattern. This is attributable mainly to easterly winds blowing over this region of the Pacific at the same time while strong westerlies were blowing here. Okay, so you have winds going this way causing upwelling, causing cooler waters, west winds here causing downwelling, pushing warm water to depth, and we'll get into that in a minute. The other thing is this large pool of warm water pushing into the U.S. West Coast. Finally, water temperatures starting to rise in the Northern California area, which is good news. There's no sign of any sort of a high. There's been this high pressure system earlier in the year that was causing a lot of upwelling here off the U.S. West Coast south of Hawaii. That's all gone. Good news. So in general, it's all looks good except for this pool, and we're really looking forward to seeing the next update probably on Monday or so to see if there's any indications that temperatures are increasing here, but the sense is that they are. At least they've returned to normal, and we'll show you that in a second. So here's another look, absolute surface temperatures, but it's the anomalies that we're most interested in. And notice here that region, same as the previous chart, now is saying pretty much neutral water temperatures over the East Pacific. That is very good news. Also notice wind anomalies from the west still, that's the case, and actual westerly winds in reality, that's good news, but we believe that's about done for now. And now the most interesting chart, water temperatures at depth. West Pacific here, East Pacific here, depth in meters, 100 meters, 200 meters. Absolute water temperatures. Notice that still most of the warm water is sort of pooled up here in the west, but it has been making some eastward progress. Still a pretty good angle on the thermocline here going into Ecuador and South America. But of more interest is this depiction. The anomalies, temperature anomalies, differences from normal. Notice, and we've been showing this the past several weeks, this is a large Kelvin wave made by generated by the first westerly wind burst in January. Almost 5-degree water temperatures here was pulled up anywhere from the date line to about 140, that's east of Hawaii, with the leading edge of it into about 105 or more west. So it's supposedly making westward progress, but here is the problem. Notice the blank square, and so this came up as a comment on the YouTube site for these videos, is why is there no data here? And you can see, notice these X's here. These are actually, there's a buoy on the surface here. There's a whole array of buoys, the TAO array, and they string the whole way from the West Pacific to the East Pacific. But along the anchor line, there's sensors at depth, and that's how they're getting this data. But notice there's no X's anywhere east of there, and that's because the array has been down, or portions of it have been down for a considerable period of time now. And as the sensors start dying off, eventually you just have no data, and you can't build you can't build an image for it. And that's what's also making us wonder about this pocket here. Actually, this has gotten better. There's cooler water, -1 degrees right there. There's some concern about that this cool pocket might block the Kelvin wave from coming in. But you know, this is all sort of a guess because there isn't any data coming here. So it's kind of hard to tell exactly what's going on. Now the question is, well, why are there no sensors here? Why doesn't NOAA go out and repair it? Well, because of the sequester and budget cuts. They haven't been able to send ships down there and go fix those buoys. The good news is that they apparently have some money because they've got ships scheduled to go down there now and go repair this. So the sooner the better, then we can start monitoring this real time. This is very suggestive of something that would be would lead to the formation of an El Nino type scenario. But again, this is 1 Kelvin wave, and 1 Kelvin wave an El Nino does not make, or vice versa. You need multiple. We have another westerly wind burst that happened. It no doubt is pumping more warm water into this pocket. So the main point is we just have to wait and see what happens. We're entering the spring unpredictability barrier, so pretty much from March, April into the end of May, even early June, the models have a real hard time getting a sense of what's happening with El Nino, La Nina, whether it's forming, but this also happens to be the prime time when it happens. So basically, you don't know what's going to happen until it actually happens. So the next month or two is going to be very, very interesting to see what happens off of Ecuador and Peru, see if water temperatures start increasing, see if this Kelvin wave actually starts warming surface waters and what effect that might have on the atmosphere. But clearly, warmer water over the Galapagos off Ecuador definitely helps fuel the jet stream and sort of is the precursor to an El Nino scenario. So for now, we have a small storm in the North Pacific. Couple of more little disturbances forecast after that, and then about a week out things fall apart. The long-term projection is looking positive. 2 westerly wind bursts in the West Pacific, Kelvin wave on the way, waiting to see what impact it has on surface water temperatures off the Galapagos, but it's much more encouraging than it has been for 3 years now. So no way to call an El Nino or anything like that at this point in time. Everything looks very neutral from the evidence at the surface, but down below in the ocean, things are definitely looking a lot different than they have for several years now. So that's good news. Again, we want to thank Vunabaka.com for bringing this forecast to you. And this has been the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for Sunday, March 9th. Thanks again for all your comments on the YouTube site, and we'll do it again next week. Thank you.